If you've ever had one of those nights where you lay in bed and you can feel the chart still moving behind your eyelids, you already know trading isn't just buy here, sell there. It gets in your head. It messes with your patience, your confidence, your ego, your money story, your identity. And that's why this topic matters, because profitability isn't just a number, it's a version of you. And I already know what's happening right now. Some of you click this video because you want confirmation. You've been grinding, you've been trying to do the right things, and you need someone to say, yeah, you're not crazy. It's actually starting to work. Other people clicked because you're tired. You're not even looking for hype anymore. You're looking for proof that you're not wasting your time. And then there's a third group, the ones who clicked because they're scared. Scared that they've been stuck for so long that maybe this is just who they are. The trader who almost gets it, but never crosses over. So let me talk to you like a real person. If you're finally becoming a profitable trader, it doesn't always feel like fireworks. It doesn't feel like a movie montage where you suddenly start winning every trade and you're buying cars the next day. A lot of times it feels quieter, boring even. It feels like you're losing the need to prove something. You stop needing the market to validate you every hour. If you're here for that kind of reality, hit like on this video because you're one of the few people who actually wants truth more than dopamine. And if you want more videos that keep it real about what it actually takes to become consistent, subscribe, because I post for the traders who are done playing games with their future. And as we go through this, I want you to comment one thing you've noticed changing about you lately, even if you're not fully profitable yet. That comment helps more people than you think, because somebody else is quietly going through the same shift, and they need to see they're not alone. Now let me set the tone. This isn't going to be one of those videos where I talk down on beginners. Everybody starts as a beginner. The problem isn't being new. The problem is staying new. The problem is repeating the same cycle for years and calling it experience. That's not experience. That's trauma with charts. Becoming profitable is basically you graduating out of certain behaviors. Not because you read one more strategy PDF. Not because you found the right indicator. It happens because your relationship with risk, time, and decision-making starts to change. I'll give you a real picture from my own journey. There was a phase where I honestly thought I was improving because I was working harder. I was charting more, I was watching more videos. I was taking more trades. I was in the game. But if you looked at my results, it was just more chaos. I was basically spinning the wheel more times and thinking that meant I was getting closer to winning. That's what a casino does. More spins, more hopes, same outcome. Then one day, I looked at my trade history and something hit me. I wasn't losing because I didn't know how to enter a trade. I was losing because I didn't know how to be a person while trading. I didn't know how to sit on my hands. I didn't know how to accept missing a move. I didn't know how to accept being wrong without trying to get it back immediately. I didn't know how to slow down. And the wild part is, the first sign that I was changing wasn't that I started winning more, it was that I started doing less dumb stuff. That's how it starts. You don't become profitable by doing a bunch of new genius things. You become profitable by deleting the habits that keep you broke. So let's talk about what that looks like in real life. One of the biggest signs you're finally becoming a profitable trader is that you stop needing to trade every day to feel like you're making progress. I'm telling you, this one is huge. When you're in the losing phase, you treat activity like it equals growth. If you didn't place a trade, you feel behind. You feel like you missed an opportunity. You feel like you wasted the day. But when you start becoming consistent, you stop measuring your progress by how many trades you took. You start measuring your progress by how good your decisions were. That includes the decision to not trade, especially that one. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit. Most traders aren't losing because their strategy is trash. They're losing because they overtrade the strategy. They treat the market like it owes them a setup every hour. It doesn't. The market is not your boss. It's not your paycheck. It's not your parent. It's not your friend. It's a machine. It does what it does. When you start becoming profitable, you stop trying to force the market to fit your schedule and you start fitting your schedule around the market's best moments. Let me make this personal. There was a time where if I sat down and didn't get a trade within 20 minutes, I'd start hunting. I'd zoom into smaller time frames. I'd start making it work. I'd convince myself that a mediocre setup was close enough. And then when it lost, I'd act surprised. Like the market betrayed me. That's not trading, that's impulse. Now, when you're actually shifting, you can sit there and watch price. do something that looks tempting, and you feel the temptation, but you don't obey it. You recognize it, you literally notice yourself wanting to click the button, and you don't. That moment right there is maturity. That moment is you winning a battle that never shows up on a P&L screenshot. If you've had that moment recently, comment, "I'm learning patience," because that's the muscle that pays you for years. And while you're at it, share this video with one trader friend who's addicted to clicking buttons. Not to roast them, but because if they keep trading like that, the market is going to humble them anyway. Better they hear it from you than from their account balance. Here's another sign you're finally becoming profitable, and it's going to sound weird at first. Your losses stop feeling personal. When you're a losing trader, every loss feels like an attack on your intelligence. It feels like you just proved you don't have what it takes. You start spiraling. You start thinking, "I'm stupid. I'm cursed. I can't do this. I'm wasting my time." And then you revenge trade because you're not even trading the market anymore. You're trading your emotions. But as you get closer to profitability, you start seeing losses as rent. You're paying for information. You're paying for the right to play the game. You're paying to stay in business long enough for your edge to show up. And this isn't just some motivational quote. This is literally how professional risk works. If you talk to people who operate with real risk, they don't get emotional about a single outcome. They're thinking in series. They're thinking in probabilities. They're thinking in process. Let me tell you a story from a third-person perspective, because I've seen this exact thing happen to so many traders. There's a guy, we'll call him Marcus. Marcus has been trading for 2 years, and he's the classic grinder. Watching charts before work, on lunch breaks, at night, weekends. He's doing everything, and every time he takes a loss, he changes something. New indicator, new time frame, new strategy, new mentor, new course. He's basically remodeling the house every time the lights flicker. Then he meets someone who's actually consistent. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. And the consistent trader looks at Marcus's history and says something simple. You don't need a new strategy. You need to stop reacting to a single trade like it's a verdict. That sentence offended Marcus at first, because in his mind, reacting is responsibility. Changing something feels like you're being proactive. But over time, Marcus starts to see the pattern. His biggest losses aren't from bad setups. They're from what he does after a loss. So he makes one rule. After a loss, he doesn't change anything. He just reviews. He writes down if he followed his plan. That's it. No revenge trade. No one more quick one. No, I'll just make it back real fast. And for a while, it feels boring. It feels like he's not doing enough. But then something happens. His account stops bleeding. His drawdowns shrink. His mindset calms down. And even before he becomes fully profitable, he becomes stable. That's the gateway. Stability comes before profitability. Always. If you're the kind of trader who can relate to Marcus, subscribe, because the whole channel is basically about getting you out of that reactive loop and into a calm, consistent mindset. Now here's a sign that's going to step on some toes, but it's real. When you're becoming profitable, you stop looking for certainty and you start respecting confirmation. There's a difference. Certainty is when you want a trade to feel guaranteed. You want the market to basically promise you that you're right. That's why people stack 12 indicators. That's why they keep waiting until the move already happened. Then they enter at the worst price because they needed to feel safe. Confirmation is different. Confirmation is when you have clear rules that tell you the setup is valid, even though you still might lose. You don't need the trade to feel guaranteed. You just need it to be aligned with your plan. If you've been waiting for trades to feel perfect before you enter, that might be why you're stuck. Because the market doesn't pay you for perfect feelings. It pays you for executing an edge with discipline. And when you start becoming profitable, you start seeing the entry as just the beginning of a probability play, not a moment where you need to feel like a genius. This ties into another major shift. Your ego starts shrinking. In the losing phase, you want to be right. You want to catch tops and bottoms. You want to call the move before it happens so you can feel special. You want the screenshot. You want the flex. But when you're getting closer, you care less about being right and more about making money. Those two things are not the same. I'll tell you something that sounds almost embarrassing. There was a period where I would rather take a trade that made me feel smart than a trade that was actually high probability. Because being the guy who called it felt good. But that was ego. And ego is expensive. Once you start becoming profitable, you choose boring money over exciting opinions. And you'll notice it in small ways. You stop arguing with the chart. You stop trying to prove your bias. You stop moving your stop loss because you want to be right. You stop holding losers and cutting winners early. You stop doing emotional gymnastics. You start letting the plan do the talking. If you've noticed your ego calming down lately, like you're not trying to win an argument with the market anymore, like the video, because that's literally the mindset shift that separates the people who make it from the people who stay stuck forever. Now let's talk about something that hits home for a lot of you. When you're finally becoming profitable, you start protecting your focus like it's money. Because it is money, in the losing phase, you'll do things like this. You'll take a trade, then open Instagram, then check a Discord, then watch somebody else's analysis, then start doubting your own trade, then you close it early, then it goes to target without you. That cycle has ruined more traders than bad strategies ever have. When you're improving, you start realizing the market punishes distraction. You start treating your trading time like a locked room. You don't let other people's opinions in. You don't let the internet in. You don't let your emotions in. You show up with a plan, you execute, you leave. And I'm not saying you become a robot. I'm saying you become deliberate. You know what profitable traders do that losing traders hate? They end their trading day early. They take the trade, manage it according to the plan, and then they go live their life. They don't sit there staring at the 1 minute candles for 6 hours hoping to do something. A lot of you think more screen time is what's going to make you better. Sometimes more screen time is what's making you worse. And the sign that you're turning the corner is when you start feeling comfortable stepping away. You can literally tell where a trader is mentally by how they react after entering. Losing traders watch every tick, like it's a heart monitor. Profitable traders already accepted the risk before they clicked. They're not shocked by volatility. They're not panicking on noise. They're letting the trade breathe. That's maturity. Let me pause and talk to you directly again. If you've been feeling more calm in trades lately, even when the market is moving against you a little, comment, "I'm getting calmer." Because the calm traders are the ones who survive long enough to win. And if you know a trader who needs this, share the video. Most people don't need more strategy. They need more emotional control. Now, I'm going to end part one with one sign that I think is the most underrated. And it's the one that sneaks up on you. You start noticing your standards rising, not your standards for the market. Your standards for yourself. You stop tolerating sloppy entries. You stop tolerating breaking rules. You stop tolerating impulsive trades. You stop tolerating random risk. You stop tolerating close enough. You start feeling a little disgusted when you catch yourself doing the old you behaviors. Not in a self-hate way, but in a growth way. Like, nah, that's not me anymore. That internal standard is what creates consistency, because the market doesn't force discipline on you. You have to become the kind of person who refuses to trade poorly. In part two, we're going to go deeper into the shifts that show up in your behavior, your risk management, and the way you think about time. Because profitability is not just about winning trades. It's about building a system you can repeat without losing your mind. If you're still here, that already tells me something about you. Most traders don't stick around for long-form content like this because they're still chasing shortcuts. They want the one setup, the one indicator, the one secret that fixes everything overnight. The fact that you're willing to sit through this kind of conversation tells me you're probably already further along than you think. Now let's keep going, because the shifts get more subtle as you move forward, and the closer you get to profitability, the quieter the changes become. That's why so many people miss them. They're not flashy. They don't look good on social media. But they're the reason some traders survive long enough to win. One of the clearest signs you're finally becoming profitable is that your relationship with time completely changes. In the losing phase, time feels urgent. You feel like you're behind. You feel like you need to hurry up and make it. Every day feels like a deadline you're failing to meet. You look at other traders and think, yeah, they're ahead of me, I'm late. I should already be profitable by now. That pressure leaks into every decision you make. And what does pressure do? It speeds you up. It makes you force trades. It makes you cut winners early. It makes you move stops. It makes you jump into things that don't fully meet your criteria because you're scared of missing out. But when you start becoming profitable, you stop racing the clock. You stop treating trading like a sprint and start seeing it for what it really is, a long, boring, repetitive marathon. I remember the exact moment this clicked for me. I was reviewing my trade history, not emotionally, just objectively, and I noticed something uncomfortable. My best trades were the ones where I felt no urgency at all. No rush, no excitement, no panic, just calm execution. And my worst trades were always the ones where I felt like I needed something to happen right now. That's when it hit me. The market rewards patience because patience keeps you aligned with probability. Urgency pulls you into randomness. When you're becoming profitable, you start feeling okay with waiting days for one clean setup. You stop thinking in terms of daily wins and losses and start thinking in terms of weeks and months. You stop asking, did I make money today? And start asking, did I follow my process this week? That shift alone removes so much emotional weight that it's hard to explain unless you've felt it. There was a trader I worked with who had a solid strategy. I mean, solid. Back tested, forward tested, proven edge, but he kept blowing accounts. And it wasn't because the strategy didn't work. It was because he couldn't wait. He needed action. He needed movement. He needed to feel productive. So we did something simple but uncomfortable. We limited him to a maximum number of trades per week. Not per day, per week. And at first, he hated it. He felt useless. He felt like he was wasting time. He felt like he was missing opportunities. But after a few weeks, something shifted. His win rate improved, his drawdowns shrank, his stress dropped, and eventually his account started growing. Nothing changed about the strategy. The only thing that changed was his relationship with time. If you've noticed yourself becoming more patient lately, not just in trading, but in life, like you're less rushed, less reactive, less desperate, that's not random. That's you maturing as a decision maker. And if that resonates, like the video, because this channel is built for people who want longevity, not lottery tickets. Now here's another sign that almost nobody talks about, but it's massive. When you're becoming profitable, you stop trying to impress other traders. Early on, trading is weirdly social. You want validation. You want someone to tell you your analysis is good. You want to post charts. You want to argue biases. You want to prove you see what others don't. But profitability is lonely, and I don't mean that in a sad way. I mean that in a focused way. As you improve, you care less about what other traders think and more about what your data says. You stop needing agreement. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your trades. You stop arguing in comment sections. You stop chasing approval. You start trusting your journal more than group chats. I've watched so many traders sabotage themselves by letting other people's opinions creep into their process. They enter a trade, then someone posts the opposite bias, and suddenly they doubt themselves. They exit early. They flip direction. They turn a good setup into a mess. When you're becoming profitable, you protect your bias until the trade is over. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've already done the work before the entry. You already accepted the risk. You already know the plan. You don't need noise. And here's the irony. The less you try to impress other traders, the more respectable your results become. Because results don't care about opinions. Let me speak directly to you again. If you found yourself talking less about your trades lately, posting less, explaining less, and just quietly executing, that's not you losing passion. That's you gaining professionalism. Subscribe if you want more conversations like this, because this channel is not about flex culture. It's about building something that lasts. Now let's talk about risk, because this is where the biggest internal shift happens. When you're a losing trader, risk feels like an obstacle. You see stop losses as enemies. You see drawdown as failure. You see losing trades as mistakes that need to be avoided at all costs. But when you're becoming profitable, risk becomes a tool. Something you respect, something you control, something you plan around. You stop asking, how much can I make on this trade? And start asking, how much am I willing to lose to find out if I'm right? That question alone separates gamblers from traders. I remember a phase where I would adjust my position size based on how confident I felt. If I felt really good, I'd risk more. If I felt unsure, I'd risk less. And that sounds logical until you realize confidence is emotional, not statistical. Once I started standardizing my risk, everything changed. My emotions stabilized. My equity curve smoothed out. My decision-making improved. And even my losing streaks became manageable. And that's another sign you're getting closer. Losing streaks stop feeling catastrophic. They feel expected, planned for, contained. Let me tell you something that might sound counterintuitive. Profitable traders don't avoid losing streaks. They design their system to survive them. If you've reached a point where a few losses in a row don't shake your confidence, that's huge. That means your risk is appropriate. That means your expectations are realistic. That means you're thinking like a business owner, not a gambler. And if you're still getting emotionally wrecked by 2 or 3 losses, that doesn't mean you're bad at trading. It usually means you're risking too much or expecting too much from each trade. Here's a subtle shift you might have noticed. You stop celebrating wins like they're miracles. Early on, a win feels euphoric. You screenshot it, you replay it, you feel validated, and then you chase that feeling again. But as you improve, wins feel normal. Not boring, but normal. You expected them. You planned for them. They don't inflate your ego because they're just part of the system working. And losses don't crush you either. They're just part of the distribution. That emotional flattening is not you becoming numb. It's you becoming stable. If you've felt less emotional on both sides lately, like wins don't make you reckless and losses don't make you spiral, that's one of the strongest indicators that you're transitioning into consistency. Now, I want to talk about something that hits a lot of traders right in the chest. When you're becoming profitable, you start taking full responsibility for your results. No more blaming the market. No more blaming brokers. No more blaming news. No more blaming manipulation. You start asking better questions. Did I follow my rules? Did I manage risk properly? Did I enter where I said I would? Did I exit according to plan? That level of ownership is uncomfortable at first because it removes excuses, but it's also empowering because it puts control back in your hands. I've seen traders stay stuck for years because blaming felt safer than accountability. Because as long as it's someone else's fault, you don't have to change. But the moment you take responsibility, you unlock growth. And here's the interesting part. When you truly take responsibility, you stop being so hard on yourself. Because you're not judging yourself as a person anymore. You're evaluating yourself as a process. You're not saying, I'm bad at trading. You're saying, this execution didn't meet my standard. That's a huge difference. If this mindset shift is landing for you, comment, I'm owning it. That comment might sound small, but it's a declaration. And declarations matter. Now let's talk about focus again, but from a different angle. When you're becoming profitable, you narrow your universe. You stop trying to trade everything. Every pair, every session, every strategy, every market condition. You pick your spots. You know when you trade best. You know what setups fit you. You know what conditions you perform well in. And you stop forcing yourself to trade environments that don't match your edge. This is where a lot of traders get stuck. They think diversification equals safety. In reality, for most retail traders, diversification equals confusion. When you focus, you build depth. You see the same patterns repeat. You recognize nuance. You develop intuition, not the guessing kind, but the experience-based kind. And you'll notice something funny. As you focus more, your confidence increases even though you're doing less. That's because confidence comes from familiarity, not from activity. Let me pause here and talk to you directly one more time. If you've been trading fewer instruments, fewer setups, fewer sessions, and you feel more clarity, not less, that's a very good sign. Share this video with someone who's still trying to trade everything under the sun. They might not listen, but the seed will be planted. Now, I want to end part 2 with a shift that's deeply personal and often overlooked. When you're finally becoming profitable, your identity starts to detach from the outcome of a single trade. You stop seeing yourself as a winner or a loser based on the last result. You stop letting the market define your worth. You stop letting a red day ruin your mood or a green day inflate your ego. Trading becomes something you do, not who you are, and that's freedom. Because when your identity is stable, your decisions become stable, and stable decisions compound. In part 3, we're going to talk about how this shift shows up in your daily habits, your self-talk, and the way you handle pressure. Because the trader you're becoming is showing up not just on the charts, but in your life. By the time traders reach this phase, the changes are no longer loud. They're not obvious from the outside. They don't show up as some dramatic before and after moment. They show up in how you talk to yourself when nobody else is around. They show up in the pauses between decisions. They show up in what you no longer feel the urge to do. One of the clearest signs you're finally becoming a profitable trader is that your inner dialogue starts changing. Early on, trading sounds chaotic in your head. Every tick means something. Every candle feels like a verdict. You're constantly narrating what's happening, panicking internally, hoping, doubting, second-guessing. It's loud, and that noise leaks into your execution. But when you're transitioning into consistency, the noise quiets down. You're still focused, you're still alert, but you're not emotionally narrating every move. You're observing instead of reacting. I remember a time where I could literally feel my heart rate spike as price approached my entry. I'd hover over the button, I'd hesitate, I'd enter late, then I'd beat myself up for it. And if price went against me even a little, the self-talk would get brutal. You always mess this up. You're too slow. You should have known better. That voice is expensive. The first time I noticed it change, it caught me off guard. I entered a trade, price pulled back against me, and instead of panic, there was just neutrality. I checked my stop. It was where it was supposed to be. I checked my risk. It was acceptable. And then I just let it play out. No internal drama, no mental spiral. That's not luck. That's emotional regulation. And emotional regulation is one of the most profitable skills in trading. If you've noticed that your self-talk is less abusive lately, less extreme, less emotional, that's not random. That's growth. And if you want to keep strengthening that muscle like the video, because everything on this channel reinforces that kind of thinking. Now let's talk about pressure, because pressure reveals everything. When you're still stuck in the losing phase, pressure makes you collapse inward. You rush, you force trades, you abandon rules, you try to make something happen. Pressure turns trading into survival mode. But when you're becoming profitable, pressure does something different. It slows you down. You become more deliberate under pressure, not less. You double-check your criteria. You reduce size if needed. You walk away if the conditions aren't right. That's a massive tell. There's a trader who's been hovering around break even for months. He's improved a lot, but he still has days where everything falls apart. One week, he has a string of small losses. Nothing crazy, but the pressure builds because he wants to end the week green. Old version of him would force a trade on Friday. He'd widen risk, he'd justify it mentally, and he'd usually end the week worse. But something changes. That Friday comes, the setup isn't there, and instead of forcing it, he shuts the platform down. He ends the week red. Slightly, and for the first time, he's okay with it. That decision saved him money he'll never be able to calculate. If you've reached a point where you can accept a red day or even a red week without feeling like your entire future is threatened, that's a sign you're becoming emotionally capitalized. And emotional capital matters just as much as financial capital. In the losing phase, preparation feels optional. You jump into the market and figure things out on the fly. You rely on instinct, vibes, and hope. You might have rules, but they're flexible when emotions get involved. But when you're becoming profitable, preparation becomes non-negotiable. You know your levels before price gets there. You know your scenarios, you know where you're interested and where you're not. You're not scrambling mid-candle trying to decide what to do. That preparation creates calm, and calm leads to consistency. If you've been doing more prep lately and less improvising, that's not you becoming rigid. That's you becoming professional. Professionals prepare so they don't have to think under pressure. And here's something interesting. The more prepared you are, the less attached you become to any single outcome. Because you already know what you'll do in multiple scenarios. That's freedom. When you're finally becoming profitable, your lifestyle starts supporting your trading instead of sabotaging it. You start valuing sleep. You start valuing mental clarity. You start paying attention to how food, stress, and distractions affect your decision-making. Not because someone told you to, but because you feel the difference. I've watched traders clean up their execution without changing anything about their strategy, just by improving their routines. Better sleep, less late-night chart watching, more structure. And I'm not saying you need to live like a monk. I'm saying you stop treating your mind like it's disposable. Because when your mind is sharp, your trading is sharp. If you've been naturally gravitating toward better habits lately, not out of discipline but out of necessity, that's a sign your standards are rising. And that ties into another major shift. You stop romanticizing struggle. Early on, struggle feels noble. Long hours, late nights, endless charts. It feels like you're earning something, like the pain means progress. But profitable traders don't worship struggle. They respect efficiency. They don't ask, how hard did I work? They ask, how effective was my process? When you're becoming profitable, you start questioning things that waste energy. You simplify, you streamline, you cut out unnecessary complexity. You realize that suffering is not a requirement for success. Consistency is. Let me share something personal again. There was a point where I thought if I wasn't exhausted, I wasn't doing enough. I'd brag about screen time, about how early I woke up, about how late I stayed up, and yet my results didn't reflect that effort. Once I simplified, once I focused on fewer setups, fewer sessions, fewer decisions, everything improved. Not because I tried harder, but because I tried smarter. If this resonates, subscribe, because this channel exists to help traders stop burning themselves out chasing things that don't matter. Now, here's a sign that sneaks up on you emotionally. You start trusting yourself again. Losing in trading does something dangerous. It erodes self-trust. You stop believing your judgment. You second-guess everything. You rely on external validation because you don't trust your own decisions. But as you improve, as you follow your plan more consistently, as you survive drawdowns without self-destructing, something shifts. You rebuild trust with yourself. You start believing that you'll do the right thing even under pressure. You believe you'll respect your stop. You believe you'll walk away when you should. That trust is priceless. And it doesn't come from winning streaks, it comes from integrity, from doing what you said you would do, regardless of outcome. If you've noticed that you're trusting your process more lately, even when results fluctuate, that's a massive step forward. Now let's talk about how you handle boredom, because boredom exposes discipline. When you're new or struggling, boredom is dangerous. It pushes you into bad trades. You feel like you need stimulation, you need action. But when you're becoming profitable, boredom becomes tolerable, even peaceful. You can sit in a slow market and not feel the urge to force something. You can accept that today might not be a trading day. That's a sign of emotional independence from the market. And I want to speak directly to you here. If you've been sitting through more boring sessions lately without doing anything stupid, that's not a lack of opportunity. That's discipline. Like the video, if you're starting to see boredom as a sign of control, not a problem to fix. Now let's talk about expectations, because expectations shape everything. Early on, traders expect trading to change their life quickly. They expect fast results. They expect big wins. And when reality doesn't match that expectation, frustration sets in. But when you're becoming profitable, your expectations mature. You expect drawdowns, you expect slow periods, you expect uncertainty. And because you expect them, they don't derail you. You stop needing trading to save you. You stop putting emotional pressure on every outcome. And ironically, that's when results start to stabilize. I've seen traders sabotage themselves by needing trading to fix everything in their life. Bills, stress, identity, self-worth. When you remove that pressure, trading becomes easier. If you've reached a point where trading is no longer your emotional lifeline, that's not you losing motivation. That's you becoming grounded. Now let's end part 3 with something that's deeply important. When you're finally becoming profitable, you start thinking in terms of survival first, growth second. You realize that staying in the game is the real edge, that blowing up is not heroic, that protecting capital is not cowardly. You stop asking, how fast can I grow this? And start asking, how do I make sure I'm still here next year? That long-term thinking is what separates hobbyists from professionals. And if you've felt that shift, if you've started prioritizing longevity over excitement, you're closer than you think. In part 4, we're going to talk about how these internal changes start showing up in your results, not in dramatic ways, but in subtle, sustainable ways. Because profitability doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, then stays. At this stage, something interesting starts happening. Not the kind of thing you post screenshots about. Not the kind of thing that gets likes. But the kind of thing that actually matters. Your results start changing in ways that don't feel dramatic, but feel stable. And that's important because most traders are conditioned to only notice extremes. Big wins, big losses, big emotions. But consistency lives in the middle, and when you're finally becoming profitable, the middle is where you spend most of your time. One of the clearest signs this is happening is that your equity curve starts smoothing out. Not skyrocketing, not doubling overnight. Smoothing out. The wild swings start shrinking. The deep drawdowns become shallower. The account stops feeling like it's constantly on the edge of collapse. You're not holding your breath every week wondering if this is the one that wipes you out. Instead, there's a rhythm. You have green periods and red periods, but they're contained. You recover faster. You don't spiral. You don't feel like every loss is digging a hole you'll never climb out of. That's not accidental. That's structure finally doing its job. Let me talk from my own experience again, because this is where a lot of people get confused. When my results first started stabilizing, I actually felt underwhelmed. I expected profitability to feel euphoric. Instead, it felt normal, and that almost scared me. I remember thinking, is this it? No adrenaline, no chaos, no emotional highs, just steady execution and gradual progress. That's when I realized something important. I had been addicted to volatility, not progress. When you're becoming profitable, you stop needing emotional stimulation from trading. You don't need every session to be exciting. You don't need every trade to be a story. You just need the math to work over time. Another sign your results are maturing is that your worst days aren't that bad anymore. Think about that. Early on, a bad day can wipe out a week, or a month, or an account. One emotional spiral and everything falls apart. But when you're becoming profitable, bad days are manageable. They sting. Sure, but they don't derail you. They don't make you question your entire future. You take the hit. You log it, you step away. That ability to absorb damage without imploding is what keeps professionals alive. If you've noticed that your red days aren't as destructive as they used to be, that's not luck. That's risk management finally doing its job. And let me say this directly to you. If you've been disappointed that your big wins haven't been huge lately, but relieved that your losses haven't been huge either, you're on the right path. Growth comes after stability, not before it. Now here's a subtle result-based sign that most people overlook. Your recovery speed improves. You don't need massive wins to get back to break even anymore. A few solid trades do the job. That means your average loss is smaller, your discipline is tighter, or both. That's efficiency. And efficiency compounds. I've seen traders who technically had the same win rate and risk reward as before, but because they cut out the emotional damage trades, their account started growing. Same strategy, fewer mistakes. That's how profitability actually arrives. Not through brilliance, through restraint. Now let's talk about your relationship with drawdown, because this is where mindset and results collide. When you're not profitable yet, drawdown feels like a threat, like proof that something is wrong, like evidence that you're failing. But when you're becoming profitable, drawdown becomes familiar. Not welcome, but understood. You know roughly how much drawdown your system produces. You know what's normal. You know when something is actually wrong versus when you're just in a statistical downswing. That awareness removes panic. You stop micromanaging your system every time performance dips. You stop overreacting. You stop changing things midstream. You trust the process because you've seen it recover before. That trust only comes from experience, not theory. If you've reached a point where drawdown no longer sends you into an existential crisis, that's a massive milestone. Like the video if that resonates, because this level of calm is rare, and it deserves to be reinforced. Now let's talk about something that's hard to quantify but very real. Your confidence becomes quiet. Early confidence is loud. It needs validation. It needs proof. It needs attention. Mature confidence doesn't. When you're becoming profitable, you don't feel the need to announce anything. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to argue your edge. You know what you're doing, and that's enough. That quiet confidence shows up in your execution. You don't hesitate as much. You don't overthink entries. You don't second-guess exits as often. Not because you're arrogant, but because you've built evidence over time. And here's the irony. The quieter your confidence becomes, the more dangerous you become as a trader. Because you're not driven by ego anymore, you're driven by process. Let me talk directly to you again. If you've noticed that you're less emotionally invested in being right and more invested in being consistent, that's not you losing passion. That's you evolving. Subscribe if you want more content that supports that evolution, because most trading content feeds ego, not discipline. Now let's address something practical. Your decision-making speed changes. This surprises people. You don't necessarily become faster. You become clearer. You know what you're looking for. You know what disqualifies a trade. So decisions become simpler. You're not scanning endlessly. You're not juggling 10 ideas at once. You're waiting for alignment. That clarity reduces mental fatigue. And reduced mental fatigue improves execution. If you felt less drained after trading sessions lately, even when markets were active, that's a sign you're making fewer unnecessary decisions. Decision fatigue kills traders. When you reduce it, everything improves. Now let's talk about money itself, because this is where psychology gets exposed. When you're becoming profitable, money starts feeling less emotional and more functional. Early on, every dollar feels heavy, every loss hurts deeply, every win feels like relief. But as you improve, money becomes information, a way to measure performance, not self-worth. You're not indifferent to money, you respect it. but you're not emotionally entangled with it. That emotional distance allows you to make better decisions. If you've noticed that you're thinking more in percentages and risk units instead of raw dollar amounts, that's a professional shift. You're thinking like a business owner, not someone chasing cash. And here's another result based sign. You stop swinging for the fences, you stop trying to make the month in one trade, you stop forcing size increases after wins, you stop gambling during drawdown to recover faster, you accept steady growth. And this is where impatience kills people. Because steady growth doesn't feel impressive at first, but it's the only kind that lasts. If you've reached a point where you'd rather protect what you've built than risk it for a quick boost, that's maturity. Now let's talk about how others start noticing, because this is interesting. People around you might not notice your profits yet, but they notice your behavior. They notice you're calmer, more focused, less reactive, less obsessed. You're not constantly complaining about the market. You're not emotionally venting about losses. You're not riding emotional highs after wins. You carry yourself differently. And sometimes that's when people start asking questions. Quietly, respectfully. That's because consistency has a presence, even before the numbers get big. Now, let me speak directly to you again because this matters. If you're at a stage where your progress feels slow but stable, don't sabotage it by chasing excitement. This is the phase where most traders quit because it doesn't feel rewarding enough. They mistake boredom for stagnation. It's not stagnation, it's foundation. Every professional goes through this phase. It's where amateurs drop off. Now let's talk about how you review performance because this is a huge tell. When you're not profitable, reviews are emotional. You focus on outcomes. You replay losses. You beat yourself up. Or you avoid reviewing altogether. But when you're becoming profitable, reviews become neutral. You look at execution. You look at rule adherence. You look at patterns. You're not judging yourself. You're studying yourself. That shift turns your journal into a weapon. If you've started reviewing trades with curiosity instead of frustration, you're doing something right. Now let's address fear because fear doesn't disappear, it evolves. Early fear is fear of losing money. Later fear is fear of breaking discipline. And that's a good trade. When you care more about violating your standards than losing a trade, you've crossed an important line. You protect your identity as a disciplined trader. And identity drives behavior. If you felt uncomfortable recently, not because of losses, but because you almost broke a rule, that's growth. Now let's end part 4 with a truth that a lot of people don't want to hear. Profitability doesn't feel like victory. It feels like responsibility. You realize you can't be sloppy anymore. You realize mistakes cost more now. You realize consistency requires maintenance. That responsibility can feel heavy at first. But it's also empowering because it means you're no longer guessing. You're managing something real. In part 5, we're going to tie everything together. We're going to talk about how to protect this phase, how not to self-sabotage when things start working, and how to think long-term without losing hunger. This is the part almost nobody prepares you for. Not how to become profitable, but how to stay in the phase where it's finally starting to work. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of traders don't fail because they can't get profitable. They fail because the moment things start working, they change. They loosen up. They get impatient again. They start testing limits. They forget what actually got them here. So if you've made it this far in the video, I want you to hear this clearly. This phase you're in right now, where things feel quieter, steadier, less emotional, less dramatic, this is not a waiting room. This is the foundation. And how you treat this phase determines whether trading becomes a chapter in your life or a permanent skill. One of the strongest signs you're finally becoming a profitable trader is that you start respecting momentum without chasing it. When things start going your way, there's a temptation to press harder, to trade more, to increase size, to capitalize while it's hot. And sometimes that's appropriate, but most of the time, that instinct is just ego wearing a business mask. Mature traders don't confuse short-term performance with permanent improvement. They don't rush to scale just because they had a good month. They wait for evidence. Repetition. Stability across conditions. If you've felt that urge lately to do more because things are going well, and you've also felt the discipline to slow yourself down, that internal tug of war is actually a very good sign. It means you're aware enough to not self-destruct. Let me tell you something from personal experience. The first time my results stabilized, I almost ruined it by getting bored. Not because I was losing, but because it didn't feel exciting anymore. I had to learn that excitement was never the goal. Sustainability was. And once I made peace with that, everything got easier. Another sign you're truly stepping into profitability is that you stop changing your system emotionally. You still improve it, you still refine, you still analyze, but you don't overhaul things because of one bad week or one good streak. Your changes become intentional, not reactive. You test ideas separately, you document adjustments, you give things time to play out. That patience is rare, and it's one of the biggest differences between traders who last and traders who restart every year. If you've noticed yourself becoming more deliberate with changes, less impulsive, more methodical, you're thinking like a professional now. And that mindset bleeds into everything else. Here's another sign that's subtle but powerful. You start thinking in terms of systems, not outcomes. You stop asking, did this trade win? And start asking, did this system perform as expected over a series? That shift is everything because systems are controllable. Single trades aren't. Once you anchor your confidence to the system instead of individual outcomes, your emotional swings flatten. Your confidence becomes durable. You stop riding the market emotionally. That's how traders survive long enough to compound. Let me speak directly to you here. If you're watching this and realizing that your best days lately weren't your biggest wins, but your cleanest execution days, that's a sign you're finally aligned with the right metric. Like the video if that resonates, because most traders never make that shift. Now let's talk about hunger, because this is where people get confused. Becoming profitable does not mean you lose hunger. It means your hunger matures. You stop being hungry for action. You become hungry for precision. You stop being hungry for validation. You become hungry for mastery. You stop being hungry for speed. You become hungry for longevity. If you felt your motivation changing lately, not fading, but sharpening, that's growth. And here's the part nobody tells you. You will have moments where you miss the chaos, where you miss the adrenaline, where you miss the emotional highs. That doesn't mean you were better back then. It means your nervous system got used to volatility. Don't go chasing that feeling again. That feeling is expensive. Let me tell you about a trader I've seen more than once in different forms. They finally get consistent. They have a few solid months. Then they decide they're ready to trade bigger, faster, more aggressively. Not because the data supports it, but because they feel invincible. And then the market reminds them, if you're in this phase, your job is not to prove anything. Your job is to protect what you've built. Protection is not fear, it's respect. Another sign you're truly becoming profitable is that you stop needing trading to fix your life. You're not trading to escape. You're not trading to compensate. You're not trading to feel worthy. You're trading because you've built a skill and you're applying it responsibly. That emotional independence is what keeps traders grounded. If you've noticed that trading no longer dictates your mood, your relationships, or your self-worth, that's one of the biggest wins you can have, even before the money scales. Now let's talk about patience again, but from the future-facing angle. Profitable traders think years ahead. They don't ask, how do I make money this week? They ask, how do I build something that still works 5 years from now? They think about sustainability, burnout, lifestyle, mental health, scalability. They don't sacrifice the future for the present. If you've started thinking that way, even subconsciously, you're no longer a hobbyist. You're a steward of a long-term skill. And that brings me to something important. At this stage, your biggest enemy is not lack of knowledge. It's complacency disguised as confidence. You don't stop learning. You just stop chasing. You don't stop refining. You just stop panicking. You don't stop being ambitious. You just stop being reckless. That balance is delicate, and it's what separates traders who peak early from traders who compound quietly. If you're serious about staying in this phase and building on it, subscribe to the channel. Not because I have all the answers, but because this channel is built to reinforce the mindset that protects consistency, not hype. Now let me close this by talking directly to you one last time. If you clicked this video wondering whether you're finally becoming a profitable trader, and you recognized yourself in multiple moments throughout this conversation, that's not coincidence. That's awareness. And awareness is the first thing that appears before consistency becomes permanent. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You just need to keep doing what you're doing with intention, discipline, and patience. If you're at that stage, comment, I'm staying the course, because saying it out loud makes it real. And share this video with someone who's grinding but doesn't realize how close they actually are. Sometimes all someone needs is confirmation that the quiet phase is not failure, it's progress. Trading doesn't change overnight, traders do. And if you've been changing in the ways we talked about today, you're closer than you think.